like how significant the Maimonides was in in the entire philosophy world. He was not well known to a lot of Westerners or Chinese, but that does not change the fact that basically laid the foundation for the reconciliation between Judaism and philosophy, I would say. And also his influence has stretched until like Spinoza, until like a very, very late period of time. Therefore, I give an introduction to him, and then it's your job. So I will come back later. And
awesome. Right. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
All right, good stuff. So everyone on board, ready to begin the English part of our lecture? Great. Let's do it. So today, as you know, we'll be talking about Maimonides. So I'm not entirely sure how much Gishu has introduced, so I'm just going to proceed with my lecture. Hopefully it won't be too repetitive. So yeah, even if you've studied philosophy, you might not have heard of this philosopher before. Or if you have heard of him, you might have heard of him in the context which, Russell mentions him as he transmits the knowledge of the Arabs, including their knowledge of Hellenic philosophy, to the West. So he's just like a transfer mechanism. Hellenic, of course, is Greek philosophy, right? Another word for Greek philosophy. So that is something that Maimonides did, and that is very important. But he more properly belongs to the Jewish philosophic tradition, which is something that I have some training in. And the reason I have some training in it is because, well, my mom's Jewish, I was raised Jewish, most people would consider me Jewish, and I went to a Jewish school for elementary school, so when I was little. So it's something I know something about, and I thought it'd be nice to give you guys an idea of a different philosophical tradition, one which Russell, for instance, doesn't really talk much about. So this class will be Maimonides as an intellectual descendant of Aristotle, and we'll follow a lot of how Aristotle influences Maimonides and how Maimonides then transfers that influence to the West, but it'd also be Maimonides as a influential Jewish philosopher. Someone brought up in the QQ chat a quote, from Moses to Moses, there is none like Moses, which, in other words, from Moses, the biblical prophet, to Moses Maimonides, there is no philosopher in the Jewish tradition quite as good. So in some ways, Maimonides is like the Jewish Aristotle, maybe? Something like that. Anyways, on to the life of Maimonides. So first thing notice here is for a Jewish guy, he looks rather Arab, doesn't he? There's good reason for that. So Maimonides was born in Cordoba, Spain in 1135. Oh, by the way, so as you know, Aristotle dies in like 320 BC, and this is now 1135, so it's just about 1400 years later. Even though that I'm not saying there were no philosophers between Aristotle and Maimonides, it's pretty amazing that 1400 years later, still the most important, most influential, most novel philosopher in the world is Aristotle. That's 1400 years later. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? So anyways, this was a point of time, 1135, at which Spain was ruled by Muslims. But there were Christian and Jewish communities coexisting peacefully. The Muslims were, on the whole, pretty friendly towards other religions. But a new Muslim dynasty came up, and they were unfriendly. Jews were forced to flee. Maimonides traveled around, eventually ending up in Egypt with his family, which the Arabic influence in Spain, as well as especially the ending up in Egypt, is why Maimonides looks rather Arab here. So Maimonides' brother took the family's money and attempted to make his fortune, and attempted to make the family rich, but unfortunately he died at sea and lost all their family's money at sea. Maimonides was forced to work as a doctor in Egypt, using the Galenic tradition of humors. And Galen was a lot of people consider the founder of medicine. It's an Aristotelian tradition, but it's way more developed than Aristotle had it. You guys probably familiar with it. It's tradition. The body is composed of 4 humors, and like illnesses come from imbalances in the humors. So if you read it, you'll read a lot about, for instance, the importance of balancing hot and cold or wet and dry. It can be somewhat similar to traditional Chinese medicine, actually, if you read it, which is interesting. I'm not sure if there's any historical influence one on the other, or if they both came up with the same ideas at the same time. And then finally, Maimonides died in 1204 at age 69 in Egypt. So that's Maimonides' life in a nutshell. It's not too exciting. Well, maybe it is. I mean, he had to flee his country and move to an entirely new one. But there's not too much to talk about. So let's go on to some historical background. So, how did Jewish people get in Spain? Why was Maimonides' family there? Why was everyone that Maimonides knew there? Well, as you should probably know, the Jews did not start in Spain. They started off in Judea. And if you are wondering where Judea got its name, or where the Jews got their name, rather, I think it should be pretty clear. Roughly speaking, that's the modern country of Israel. So Jews had sort of a rough time of it. They're conquered by the Romans in 63 BCE, revolted in 66 CE, and their holy temple was destroyed. This is destruction of the first temple. Many Jews were driven into exile and enslaved. 132 CE again, they revolted again, were briefly successful, and then were defeated by Hadrian, who is a famous Roman emperor. You may know of Hadrian's Wall. Jews were driven from their capital city, Jerusalem. Even more Jews were driven into exile. And combined with the fact that, like most people in the Mediterranean, Jews traded and settled everywhere. By the Middle Ages, Jews were everywhere except for Judea. I mean, first their holy temple was destroyed. Then their country was pretty much wrecked in their capital city. All the Jews were driven out. So Jews settled everywhere. Now, let's talk a little bit about Spain. So Spain is, Spain is around the same area, right? You can imagine how you would get there by being a trader or a settler and sailing across the Mediterranean. So Spain was taken over by the Visigoths in 500s. Visigoths were a Germanic tribe. These guys with impressive mustaches and pointy hats. Although they were at first tolerant, once the Visigoths adapted Catholicism, which you guys should know about from a Gauchou's class, Christianity becoming a force, becoming a state religion, they started to force the Jews to convert. So it was a relief to the Jews when the Moors, Muslims from the south, invaded Spain. The Jews helped them conquer and hold Spain. This was a golden age for the Jewish people, and Jews became immersed in Arabic learning and culture, including the philosophic tradition the Arabs had inherited from the Greeks. So Jews from abroad flood into Spain. They hear about this golden age, and Spain becomes a center for the Jewish people. One thing that's sort of amazing here is the fact that despite the fact that Jews are everywhere in the world, it's still a pretty consistent culture and religion. So Jews coming to Spain find a lot more in common with Jews already in Spain than you would expect. So starting in the 1000s, the Muslim Umayyad rule falls apart. Christians begin to reconquer parts of Spain. They use Jews as advisors. And this is known as the Reconquista, Spanish for the reconquering. This is pretty good timing, by the way. At this point, a new Muslim dynasty is coming in, and they're the ones that are pretty unfriendly to Jews. And also, in terms of Christians using Jews as advisors, that's a lot of the way that Christians get Arabic ideas, is by using the same advisors as the Muslims did. And by the time we get to Maimonides, the Almohads, new dynasty, have taken over most of Islamic Spain. Golden age of Jews under Muslim rule is at an end. Some Jews head up to North Spain to go to the parts under Christian rule, but most depart for more friendly territory, and many depart for Egypt, which is also ruled by Muslims, but is ruled by friendlier Muslims. Okay, cool. So does the historical background make sense to everyone? Awesome. Let's talk about philosophy then. So I'm going to cover Maimonides' philosophy through 3 of his major works: Guide for the Perplexed, Commentary on the Mishnah, and the Treatise on Logic. And you can see these 3 down here. Original cover for Commentary on the Mishnah, Guide for the Perplexed, and restored copy of Treatise on Logic. So these are Maimonides' 3 major works. So let's talk about what he talks about. So the Guide for the Perplexed takes the Torah, or the Old Testament, if you've happen to be Christian, and explains it through Aristotelian terms. First, Maimonides proves that God is not corporeal. He doesn't have a body, by taking Hebrew terms from the Torah which describe God, showing they are not meant to be taken as evidence of the body of God. So for instance, if it says God reached out a hand and helped the Israelites, Maimonides proves that we're not meant to take that as God actually having a body. Maimonides then defines God by not defining God. He says God cannot be described in positive terms, but only in negative ones. So his essence is unknowable. So you can say God isn't bound to time. You can say he's shapeless. You can say he's changeless. But you can't actually say anything positive about him. Like you can't say he is this. You can just say he is not this. Finally, there's the scientific part of the book. The physical structure of the universe is Aristotelian, with heavenly spheres, but created by God, and heavenly spheres Maimonides also identifies as angels. And then the last part of Guide for the Perplexed is paradoxes and puzzles associated with God through logic, like the problem of evil. So this is a pretty interesting book. You're taking what is a completely religious text, the Torah, aka the Old Testament, and you're explaining it entirely through Aristotle. It's an entire reinterpretation. If this sounds radical now, it was even more radical back then. So it's a pretty interesting task. Let's talk about our next book here, Commentary on the Mishnah. So before we talk about Maimonides' commentary on the Mishnah, we need to talk about the Mishnah itself. So the Mishnah, or Mishnah, is a collection of Jewish oral traditions, which cover everything from theology to ethics to metaphysics. So there are a couple collections of Jewish oral traditions and commentaries, which get really complex. It's what you would study if you studied to become a rabbi or a Jewish holy leader, and it's a lot of debates about debates. So I've actually posted a picture here. So this is a passage from the Torah or Old Testament. This is a debate on the passage. This is a debate on the debate of the passage. This is also a debate on this. This is a debate on this. And this is a debate on this. So you basically go in concentric circles out. You just get centuries upon centuries of debates on the same topics. So starting with this 7 lines from the Torah, you get 1 debate, 2 debate, 3 debate, 4 debate, 5 debate. So commentary on the Mishnah is Maimonides' attempt at organizing the Mishnah into a coherent fashion, summarizing debates, and offering opinions on undecided questions. As you might imagine, this is actually pretty hard to do because it's not written in a very readable fashion. It's a lot like Russell's book, but it's sort of a harder task. So for right now, I'm only going to talk about Maimonides' original contributions and commentary on the Mishnah, which have to do with the soul and ethics. So first, Maimonides defines the soul, which is the unifying principle of a human being. So it unifies, it brings the human being together. It has many aspects and things it can do. So, by the way, Maimonides inherits Aristotle's love of categories. There are 5 parts of the soul and 7 aspects per part for a total of 35 aspects. So Maimonides categorizes a lot of things. Aristotle has some negative intellectual legacies. So ethics is sort of taken from Aristotle. If you remember, you pursue virtues, you have vices. Virtues are in the middle of extremes. So don't be too brave, but don't be too timid. Be right in the middle. Don't be too charitable, but don't be not charitable enough. Be right in the middle. Maimonides takes a medical approach. He is a doctor and says that sometimes if you have a diseased soul, if you're immoral, you have to pursue the other end of the extreme to have a healthy soul again. So for instance, if you are overly reckless and you're always doing things without thinking about it, you have to spend some time being a coward and never doing anything. You can also, if you guys are interested, here are some other theories about the soul. Maimonides' theories about the souls. Evil souls desire evil things, good souls desire good things. Vices serve to bring us further away from God. Virtues bring us closer to God. Closeness to God makes us healthy. So therefore, a good soul will desire a good thing and be healthy. Bad souls desire bad things and will be unhealthy. So when he says someone who is immoral has a diseased soul, he's not being metaphorical here. He really does believe that like people are sick because they do bad things. So it's not a very defensible philosophy, namely because, well, I mean, I would say it's pretty obvious if you think that every sick person did something bad, or even that doing bad things makes you become sick. It just seems like there's very many examples that would prove you wrong. So I don't think it's really worth arguing about. I'm just noting that it's something Maimonides believed. So other things that Maimonides covers in the commentary on the Mishnah. If God decides how the world will be, how is free will possible? So here's the paradox. Maimonides explains that the world follows the will of God in a general sense, but not a specific one. So, for instance, God decided that there would be evil in the world, but he doesn't decide that there's any specific man will be evil. Sort of related, how is free will possible? If God knows what will happen in advance. God knows what will happen in advance, but his knowledge is different from our sort of knowledge. This means free will exists and God knows what will happen. So, hand waving. Free will exists, God knows what will happen. Stop asking questions. Okay. Before we go on to the treatise on logic, does everyone understand first two books, Guide for the Perplexed, Commentary on the Mishnah? Yeah, so that is correct. You can't, according to Maimonides, you can't ask what God is. You can't ask what the purpose of God is. You can only define what God isn't. And you can say what the purpose of God isn't. So the way Maimonides argues that is very interesting, and we will cover that in a bit. All right, good stuff. Let's go on to the treatise on logic, which is most related to what we want to talk about, how to think. So Maimonides takes most of his logic straight from Aristotle. I've covered the parts that he doesn't below. It's not as well thought out as Aristotle. But he does add something which is a lot of discussion on how to use philosophy, or when to use philosophy and when to use logic, which is important for a religious person like Maimonides. So there are different types of propositions: universal, particular, and singular. So remember, proposition is something like all men are mortal, right? Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. Our propositions are all men are mortal and Socrates is a man. So universal about all of a category, all men are mortal. Particular about some of a category, some men are mortal. Singular about one of a category, Socrates is mortal. So propositions can either be true or false, or about past, present, or future. If propositions are false, they can be possible or impossible. This is a weird division. I don't know entirely why it's true or false or about past, present, or future, but it's a division that Maimonides makes. The false, possible, or impossible makes more sense, right? All men are mortal or no men are mortal. Both those propositions are possible. Only one of them is true. Impossible would presumably be something like Socrates is a unicorn, because unicorns exist. So there are 4 propositions that are known to be true and require no proof. Perceptions, so things you see or hear or smell. First ideas, like obvious ideas. Conventions, which are cultural taboos, and traditions. And second ideas, like geometric theorems, require no proof because they're obvious. So here's where it should start getting very confusing, because the 4 propositions that are known to be true and require no proof are not something that Aristotle would have agreed with. I mean, everything you see known to be true, don't need to prove it. Everything that you think of that seems obvious, known to be true, you don't need to prove it. All cultural taboos, like for example, traditional Jewish cultural taboo, you're not allowed to eat meat and milk. Known to be true, not allowed, you don't need to prove it. Traditions, Jewish tradition, you can't work on the Sabbath, you can't work on Saturdays. Known to be true, not need to prove it. Even geometric theorems, don't need to prove it. So it's pretty weird starting about here, because Aristotle would not have been on board with saying all of these things you don't need to prove. But this is what Maimonides thinks. Let's go on. So forms, unlike with Aristotle, exist in the real world, but they're very obvious. They're just the shape that something's in. So Aristotle would have looked at a bed and said, what makes this a bed? Why do I put this in the category of bed? Maimonides just says, it's wood in the shape of a bed. That's its form, covered. So that's the end of Maimonides' philosophy. It's weird, and it's not quite as rigorously logical as Aristotle's. So let's cover exactly what it is. Why did Maimonides think like this? Why did he write like this? And why is he regarded so highly? So first, in terms of background to philosophy, let's cover the obvious one, which is Aristotle. So Aristotle's influence is obvious and ever in Maimonides. This is an Arabic text portraying Aristotle, by the way, talking to 2 of his students. His effort of organization and categorization is Aristotelian. You might not think of it. You might think, oh, it's obvious if there's a group of laws, you would want to organize it into categories. But Jewish writers and thinkers before Maimonides didn't see that need. They never organized their laws. It was just something that you would know over a period of a huge amount of study. However, Maimonides takes this inspiration from Aristotle that no, you need a logical organization to a system of laws. Also, the way Maimonides argues and proves his points are mostly Aristotelian. especially his definitions and his distinctions between positive and negative, specific and general, which we covered already. So let's talk about the other side of Maimonides' philosophy, why it seems so unfamiliar to us, why it seems so strange. So the parts of Maimonides' philosophy that are unfamiliar come from a Jewish tradition, close reading and debate. So when Maimonides makes points about God, or God's word, or God's actions, or free will, or whatever, a lot of the way he does so is by arguing about homophones and metaphors. So this very close reading is within a Jewish tradition where there's not a lot of text to argue over, but a lot of arguments to be made. So homophones are words that sound similar, like new and new. So like something that is, or I just saw in the chat, night and night. Metaphor is comparison, the dog is Snow White. So if you remember, this is the amount of text you have to argue over. This is how many arguments are being made over it. How do you do that? Reading things very, very closely and arguing over them very, very loudly. So debate's also very key in understanding Jewish philosophy. Unlike with Christian philosophy, dissent is very encouraged. So for instance, Maimonides' texts, which were very popular within the Jewish community, were often sold together with a famous rabbi's dissent. So readers could read Maimonides' arguments and the counter arguments. That was just expected, and that's not something you see in Western philosophy, but that was an expectation in Jewish philosophy. As soon as you get an idea, you get someone arguing against it. So this focus on the process of argumentation rather than on definitive answers makes Maimonides' text less definitive than Aristotle's or his descendants, his direct descendants, with less rigor and more room for debate. So remember, it seems very strange to us that Maimonides doesn't want us to prove geometric proofs. He says there's no reason to. Well, why is that? Because in Maimonides' mind, they're already proven. Someone already proved it. He trusts the ancient Greeks. He knows they're right. So there's no more debate to be had over that. So if you think about it, it's pretty tough, Maimonides' task. He fits together a religion that believes in one definitive source text, the Torah, with no evidence behind it, and then continued debate about it with no conclusion, with a philosopher, namely Aristotle, who builds everything up from the ground up and believes he has the absolute answers. All right. So that's very briefly Maimonides' philosophy, background to philosophy. 清楚了吗？All right. Good stuff. So what we're going to be, you don't understand much? All right. We're going to cover Maimonides' actual written text to get an idea of how he really argues. And that's going to be most of this class. So let's see if that makes more sense afterwards. So the specific text that we're going to be covering is Guide for the Perplexed, which ends up being Maimonides' most influential work in the non-Jewish world. It's first written in 1190, It's translated into Hebrew in 1204. It's very controversial. It's read widely in some Jewish circles and non-Jewish circles, and banned or burned in others. Some consider it heretical, and others are just mad that it tries to settle debates that are unsettled. For instance, at that point in time, the corporeality of God, whether God actually has a body or not, is very controversial, and rabbis are mad at Maimonides for saying that he has an answer when they think really he should admit that there's a debate. So another reason why it's very controversial is that there's a Jewish tradition that certain ideas are only allowed to be taught to prepared students, and even then only indirectly. So Maimonides states in his introduction that this book is only for the educated, but he writes it in such a way that it's impossible to keep out of the hands of the uneducated. He writes it in pretty easy to understand Hebrew, and Jews have a pretty strong literary tradition, so most people could read. So if you write a book in Hebrew, most people are going to be able to read it. So the specific controversial passage that is where Maimonides explains Ezekiel's chariot. If you guys know the Bible, it's where the prophet Ezekiel sees God riding a battle chariot. There's a very specific tradition about exactly, first of all, what it means, and that's seen as something that could not be taught to like a normal person, and it can only be taught to a like very good student. And once the student is ready, the only way it's supposed to be taught to them is like indirectly, like the teacher is supposed to drop hints about what it might mean, and then the student figures it out for themselves. So the fact that Maimonides just writes down what it means in a book makes a lot of people angry. So I'm going to skip to the part where there's actually an interesting logical argument that you guys would want to read. But I thought before I do that, I'd give you an idea of what it means exactly with what I meant by close reading. So it is necessary to notice that the plural marot Elohim, visions of God, is here used, and not the singular mareh, vision, for there were several things of different kinds that were perceived by the prophet. The following three things were perceived by him: the Olanim, the Hayot, and the man above the Hayot. Description of each of these visions is introduced by the word Ba'ereh, and I beheld. The account of the Hayot begins, and I looked and beheld a whirlwind. The account of the Ophanim begins, now I beheld the Hayot. Behold, one Ophana upon the earth. Vision of that which is above the Hayot in order and rank begins, and I saw Va'areh as the color of the amber, from the appearance of his loins ever upward. The word Va'areh, and I beheld, only occurs these three times in the description of the Merkabah. The doctors of the Mishnah have already explained this fact, and my attention was called to it by their remarks. For they said that only the first two visions, namely that of the Rayot and the Ophanim, might be interpreted to others, but of the third vision, that of the Hashmal and all that is connected with it, only the heads of the sections may be taught. So as you can tell by the end of it, what this is an argument is which parts of the chariot of Ezekiel can be taught. So Maimonides is arguing that you can teach two parts, but only part of the third. And he says people before him thought it was all just one part. And the reason why he says it's actually three parts and not one part is because they use the word and I beheld or I saw three times. Ba'areh, ba'areh, ba'areh. And he's arguing here that if they meant it to all be considered as one whole thing that could not be taught, they would have used the verb once, and they also wouldn't have put a plural word in here. They wouldn't have said visions of God. They would have just said vision of God. So this is the style of arguing that takes up most of Guide for the Perplexed. So if you find this sort of stuff interesting, it's sort of like reading poetry or reading some very complicated book. It can be a lot of fun. If you don't find this interesting, it's pretty exhausting because Maimonides is arguing about, well, really his whole argument here is just based on grammar, right? Is it the plural or is it the singular? Do they use the verb 3 times or do they use it 1 time? So that's how most of the book is written. But let's go on into things that actually bear more relevance to this class. So for instance, let's look at the Aristotelian mind-body partition. So as you guys remember, like mind-body, man has a mind and man has a body. There's like the soul, which thinks and unifies the body. The body dies, the soul is eternal. By the way, I see Sophie in the chat, you say you're really perplexed. Good thing this is a guide for the perplexed. Let's see if we can make this guide for the perplexed actually do its job. So we're gonna see how he explains this and see if we can get some sense of it. So the corporeal element in man is a large screen and partition that prevents him from perfectly perceiving abstract ideals. So you can't see ideals because you have a body. This would be the case even if the corporeal element were as pure and superior as the substance of the spheres. How much more must this be the case with our dark and opaque body? However great the exertion of our mind may be to comprehend the divine being or any of the ideals, we find a screen and partition between him and ourselves. Thus the prophets frequently hint at the existence of a partition between God and us. They say he is concealed from us in vapors, in darkness, in mist, or in a thick cloud, or use similar figures to express that on account of our bodies, unable to comprehend his essence. It's the meaning of the word. Clouds and darkness are round about him. So Maimonides is taking an Aristotelian idea here. We have a body that makes it so it's hard for us to see abstract ideals, like say geometry, right? And he says this would be true even if our body were the same as the substance of the stars, which he sees as like shining. But he says it's even more so because our body is dark. And here it's not just a metaphor, like it's the shining of the sun. Here it's sort of like a literal thing, like body is dark. All right. So through thinking, we understand these complex ideas, right? So, and then Maimonides says we understand these ideas through thinking and logic, but we don't understand them intuitively. Then he backs up this idea with a quote from Psalms, from Holy Book, clouds and darkness are round about him, which is actually referring to this, that God is described as literally shrouded in clouds. But Maimonides is using it to defend Aristotle's ideas. So, the message you guys should be taking away from this, the way Maimonides is arguing here, is that he takes an idea from Aristotle, which is that the mind and the body are separate, and that we can only understand things like geometry or logic through sort of our higher thinking, through our soul, and we can't understand them just through our body. So he takes this idea. He says, I agree with it completely. He applies it to Jewish thought, and he says it's also impossible to understand God. And then he backs it up with a quote from the Bible, clouds and darkness are round about him, which really has nothing to do with Aristotle. Whoever wrote this did not know anything about Aristotle, but Maimonides is using it as evidence for Aristotle. So you might not entirely get the point that Maimonides is trying to make, but do you understand the way in which he's arguing? All right. Cool. So this is really the important thing here, is I want you guys to understand how Maimonides is arguing, because it's a very unique form of argument, and it's a very unique and it's like a unique effort to try to use someone who's totally logical like Aristotle and using him to explain and organize something that's really illogical, namely the Bible. All right. So it is 9:55 on my end, and I know you guys are working hard, so let's take a 5-minute break, meet back here at 10 o'clock. I know this is difficult. So, yeah, let's meet back here at 10 o'clock. In the meanwhile, I will answer any questions that you may have, but you should feel free to go grab a snack or some water. Go use the restroom. All right. All right. So questions. We got a question from Sophie. If the argument cannot be proved, can it be called an argument? I would say it's a different style of argument. I would say probably someone like Socrates would be pretty uncomfortable with it, and he might say it's not an argument. I think it is still an argument, even if there's no definitive answer. In the same way that we found some of Socrates' points to be either misguided or finding conclusions about things that we didn't find a conclusion on, or finding conclusions that we wouldn't agree with. I would say we would still call it an argument. All right. Second question. since Maimonides thinks people shouldn't ask what God is, does that mean the languages of people are incompatible with God's existence? Do they have an innate defect when it comes to the topic of God? To some extent, yeah. There's actually there's a Jewish story which relates to this, where like this little boy goes to temple during like holy services, like the holiest holiday of the year. And he can't speak, but he has a whistle, and like in the middle of the service, he takes the whistle, and he blows it, and there's this loud sound, and then the service stops. And his father is very angry, and his father says, when you get home, I'm gonna, spank you. And the rabbi says, well, actually, wait, that like little boy who couldn't speak blowing the whistle was a more true prayer to God than any of the ones that have been said here today. So I think the point of that story is, yes, there is languages fail to some extent when try to explain God or try to talk about God, and really it's there's a feeling to it that's much more important than the words themselves. All right, so what do these words mean? Marot and hashmal are, marot is a Hebrew word that means vision. Hashmal is a term from the Bible, which is part of Ezekiel's chariot. Beheld is to see. Whirlwind is wind that spins in a circle like a tornado. Amber is like a type of jewelry that you often find insects in. It's a fossilized tree sap. If you saw Jurassic Park, that was all about amber and the insects trapped in amber. Loins are the part of the body. All right. So those were the words you asked. In Maimonides' theory, why does he try to build up a gulf between God and ordinary people? So Maimonides is coming from a tradition in which there are rabbis, there are holy people, and there are ordinary people. And so Maimonides is actually more friendly towards ordinary people than other people in the Jewish religion would have been. So I think Maimonides, you're seeing him in this tradition as like being unfriendly towards ordinary people, but he's actually being much more friendly. For example, in the Holy Temple, there's only certain people who could like enter it, and then there are only certain people among those could be enter like the inner rooms, and only one person could know the big secret, which is the name of God, the true name of God. So Maimonides is just coming from a very different tradition here. In Jewish ideas, what kind of students could be called prepared? It's up to their teacher, but it would be after, no problem. It's up to their teacher, but generally speaking, it'd be after studying for like 20 years or so. Like it's a lot of reading and a lot of memorization, and then their teacher would decide for themselves that, oh, this person is prepared enough. I should say this guy is prepared enough, because it would only be men who were taught. It would never be a woman. All right, cool. So let's see if we can get Gushu in here to help summarize. In the meanwhile, thanks for being patient with this. I know this is difficult. It's very foreign, but I think it's interesting too. All right. Last question. What books were Jewish students required to read? Essentially, the Torah and commentaries on the Torah. So there are many, many commentaries. There are also some Jewish philosophers who they had to read. And after Maimonides' death, Maimonides would be one of the Jewish philosophers that they had to read. All right. Let's begin again. So, there's this famous question. If there is God, why is there evil? Right? Because if God is all-powerful, then he shouldn't be allowed evil. If he does allow evil, he seems like a bad person. Or, well, I guess not a bad person, but he seems evil himself. If he's powerless to not allow evil, then he's not all-powerful. So either God is evil himself, or God isn't all-powerful. So neither one of those seem to work with either Jewish tradition or Christian tradition. So in that case, how can we explain the existence of evil in the world? So the proposition has therefore been laid down in the most general term. All evils are negations. Thus for man, death is evil. Death is his non-existence. Illness, poverty, and ignorance are evils for man. All of these are privations of properties. After these propositions, it must be admitted as a fact that it cannot be said of God that he directly creates evil, or he has the direct intention to produce evil. This is impossible. His works are all perfectly good. So Maimonides says, well, God doesn't create evil because evil is not something that's created. Death is evil, and you can think like someone like Socrates agreeing with this, right? With saying that death is evil. So death is evil. Death is non-existence. Illness is evil. Illness is the lack of health. Poverty is evil. Poverty is the lack of wealth. Ignorance is evil. Ignorance is the lack of knowledge. So God only creates good things. God creates existence, and existence is good. Evil is negative, cannot be acted upon. He creates evil insofar as he produces the corporeal element as it actually is. Always connected with negatives, and is on that account the source of all destruction and evil. Those beings that do not possess this corporeal element are not subject to destruction or evil. Consequently, the true work of God is all good, since it is existence. Book which enlightened the darkness of the world says, therefore, and God said everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. So, in some sense, this is an argument from Socrates, or Aristotle would have been who Maimonides is getting it directly from. Evil isn't something that exists. Evil is just the opposite of existence. So God's created good things, but whenever he creates something good, it always is connected with the negative. It's always connected with evil. But everything that doesn't exist is good. So substance, like the body, and form. Form is good. Substance is part good, part evil. And then once Maimonides has made this sort of Aristotelian argument, he backs it up with another quote from the Bible. God saw everything that he had made. Behold, it was very good. So it's predetermined. Maimonides has an idea in mind, and then he's using logic to support his idea, and then he's using the Torah to support his logic. So in the one sense, it's not quite an honest use of logic because he's not following it to his conclusion. But at the same time, it is very interesting because it's so, again, it's really different from the way that someone like Aristotle would argue. Okay, does this passage make sense to you guys? All right. It's a little crazy, but as long as you guys understand the craziness, that's the important thing for me. All right. Great. So I'm moving on. If you guys are clear on this, I'm moving on. So Maimonides' next thing that he's tackling is what's the ultimate purpose? And you guys remember we had this with Aristotle's idea of the final cause. Final cause of a statue might be to be put in a museum. But what's the final cause of the museum? What's the final cause of man? So Maimonides is taking on this question. What's the purpose of everything? So the question, what is the purpose thereof, cannot be asked about anything which is not the product of an agent. Therefore, we cannot ask what is the purpose of the existence of God. He has not been created. According to these propositions, it is clear that the purpose sought for everything produced intentionally by an intelligent cause. That is to say, a final cause must exist for everything that owes its existence to an intelligent being, but that for which is without a beginning, final cause need not be sought. So the first part of his argument is final causes only applied to things which were created by someone. So for instance, you can ask what the final cause of a statue is. What's the purpose of this statue? Because that was created by a sculptor. Or you can even ask what's the final purpose of the earth, or what's the final cause of the earth. And Maimonides' argument there is the earth was created by God. So it makes sense. However, because God is not created by someone else, and in fact was never created at all, it doesn't make sense to say, what's the purpose of God? It's a ridiculous question, according to Maimonides. It'd be like asking, what is the color of, I don't know, a triangle? It's just a question that doesn't make sense. So that's the first part of Maimonides' argument. And by the way, you guys should note that Aristotle probably would not have agreed with this. I'm not sure that he was thinking, I don't think he believed that final causes only matter if something's created by an intelligent being. However, it's Maimonides, again, he has an idea and he's using Aristotle's words to help prove his idea. So, second, I infer from the words of Aristotle that according to his opinion, the ultimate purpose of the genera is the preservation of the course of genesis and destruction. This course is absolutely necessary for the successive formation of material objects, because individual beings formed of matter are not permanent. So the ultimate purpose of everything in general is so things are continue to be created and destroyed. And this is absolutely necessary. So things will continue to be created because things that are created are not permanent. And second, for the production of the best and the most perfect beings that can be formed of matter, because the ultimate purpose is to arrive at perfection. So the ultimate cause of everything, ultimate purpose of everything, is the course of genesis and destruction. Things need to keep being created, and whatever is in the end needs to be the best thing possible, needs to be the most perfect thing possible. Now, it is clear that man is the most perfect being formed of matter. He is the last and most perfect of earthly beings. In this respect, it can truly be said that all earthly things exist for man, i.e., that the changes which things undergo serve to produce the most perfect being that can be produced. So the final cause, the ultimate purpose for everything, is ultimately for man, because man's the most perfect being. Remember, perfect here is a bit of a difficult word because it's tricky when Aristotle uses it and it's tricky when Maimonides uses it. But man is the most perfect being, and everything is being created for man. So whether or not Aristotle would have agreed with this is not quite the most important thing, because what Maimonides is doing here is he's closely reading Aristotle and using metaphors, synonyms, and that sort of thing to support his argument. So Aristotle is being treated as an authority here in the same way that the Bible is as an authority. So through this, Maimonides comes to the conclusion that Earth was created for man. Now, that's not a conclusion Aristotle would have supported necessarily. However, remember here, Maimonides is using words from the Bible. This is the meaning of the words "clouds and darkness are round about him" to support something that the writers of the Bible wouldn't have believed and never had heard of. Here, he's using the words of Aristotle to support conclusions that Aristotle wouldn't have agreed with. That's not necessarily the important thing for Maimonides, and it's not. And in this tradition, like, Maimonides would have defended his position, but he would have also expected you to argue with him. By using, if you were one of his students, you would have used Aristotle's text to argue with Maimonides. So again, the importance of this is the process of argumentation. All right. Does that make sense? I mean, maybe not. Yeah. He'd be expecting students to debate. He'd be expecting his colleagues to debate. So yeah, that's a big. That's an important part of the whole tradition, is that nothing here is ever totally definitive. There's always a debate going on. No one answers anything completely and for all time. All right, on to the next one. All right. So now, if we say that man is the purpose of all of creation, we come to a bit of a problem. So if man's the purpose of all creation, why wouldn't you just create man in the first place? Let's see how Maimonides answers this one. Those who hold this view, namely that the existence of man is the object of the whole creation, may be asked whether God could have created man without those previous creations, whether man could only have come into existence after the creation of all other things. If they answer in the affirmative that man could have been created even if the heavens did not exist, they will be asked what the object of all these things. So they do not exist for their own sake, but for the sake of something that could exist without them. So if man could have been created before the heavens, why wouldn't man have been created before the heavens, considering that the purpose of these things is for man? Even if the universe existed for man's sake and man existed for the purpose of serving God, as been mentioned, the question remains, what is the end of serving God? He does not become more perfect if all his creatures serve him and comprehend him as far as possible, nor would he lose anything if nothing existed beside him. So here the argument is, okay, well let's say that the universe is created for man, man is created for serving God. Why would God do that? What's the point of serving God? So God doesn't gain anything from it, from either people serving him or people understanding him, and he wouldn't lose anything if man never existed in the first place. So this seems like a difficult question, if you agree with Maimonides' argument so far. Let's see what Maimonides' answer is. We must, in continuing the inquiry as to the purpose of the creation, at last arrive at the answer. It was the will of God, or his wisdom decreed it, and this is the correct answer. So the answer here is because God said so. The wise men in Israel have therefore introduced in our prayers the following passage: Thou hast distinguished man from the beginning and chosen him to stand before thee. Who can say unto thee, what dost thou? And if he be righteous, what does he give thee? They have thus clearly stated that it was not a final cause that determined the existence of all things, but only his will. So Maimonides' answer in the end is because God wanted it to be so. It's only his will, and there's no ultimate purpose. So it sort of shuts the argument down. It doesn't seem like it's quite an honest grappling of this. It's not really honestly grappling with this question. It just, God says so, which, seems a bit unfair, right? Because you could end literally every debate with that. What's the purpose of this? Oh, God wanted it to be that way. So it's a little intellectually dishonest on Maimonides' part to shut the paradox down in this fashion. Okay, but you guys understand the paradox and Maimonides' answer here? All right. Everyone who was confused in the beginning, is this making more sense now? So, okay, so your question is, why would God want to do this? Maimonides' answer is just, the only answer is that God did want to do this. Maimonides basically says that's not a question we can really answer. Or, and for that matter, really ask. All right. Other people who were confused at the beginning. Is this all making more sense now, or are you still confused? All right, so everyone's clear? 你明白了吗? All right. Let's keep going. So, Maimonides on astrology. So you guys know what astrology is, presumably. The stars determine your fate. To some extent, you can see the future based on looking at the stars. You can see what will happen to you. So let's see how Maimonides answers this. So his biggest question here is going to be, does it make sense from a biblical standpoint? The following question may be asked about the opinion of philosophers on this subject. There is no doubt that from a philosophical point of view, it would be a mistake to assume that the spheres exist for the purpose of regulating the fate of one individual person or community. But it is not absurd to think that they serve to regulate the affairs of mankind, since these mighty individual beings would serve to give existence to the individual members of the species, the number of which, according to philosophers, will never come to an end. So he says, it seems strange that the heavens, that the stars exist for one person, but it doesn't seem impossible that they exist for everyone. We can best illustrate this by the following simile. An artisan makes iron tools of 100 weight for the purpose of making a small needle of the weight of a grain. If only one needle had to be produced, we admit that it would certainly be bad management. It would not be entirely a failure. But if with these enormous tools needle after needle is produced, even many hundredweights of needles, preparation of those tools would be a wise act and excellent management. So he says, in the same way, creating some huge tools to create one needle would be a silly idea. Creating huge tools to create many needles would be an excellent idea. In a similar manner, the object of the spheres may be the continuance of successive genesis and destruction. The succession of genesis and destruction serves, as has already been said, to give existence to mankind. This idea is supported by biblical texts and sayings. So, let's look at the way this argument goes. So first, he starts off with an Aristotelian argument from purpose. Then he makes a Socratic analogy. Finally, he supports it with a biblical quote. Here it's not a direct quote. He just says it is supported by biblical sayings. So this pretty much sums up how Maimonides thinks. He has an idea, and then he needs to support it. So first he supports it through Aristotle, and then through Socrates, and last through the Bible. And this is actually a pretty important question at this point. Astrology is very popular, both in Greek and Arabic thought. Maimonides, as a doctor, would have been asked to perform astrological readings. It'd be an important part of his job. So he needs some way to prove it. He can't end up with the conclusion that astrology is nonsense. So this is how he does it. All right. This makes sense. All right. So last thing we're gonna cover, last argument we're gonna cover is Maimonides on anatomy. So this is, remember Maimonides is a doctor, Galenic training. So this is going to be an important question for him. So, on considering the divine acts or the processes of nature, get an insight into the prudence and wisdom of God as displayed in the creation of animals, the gradual development of the movements of their limbs, and the relative positions of the latter. We perceive also as wisdom and plan in the successive and gradual development of the whole condition of each individual. So, when we think about God, when we think about how God works, one way we can sort of see how God works is through animals. And we can see it in how limbs are developed and how the body is developed. But nerves, even those that come directly from the spinal cord, are too soft to set the joints in motion. Therefore, God made the following arrangement. The nerves branch out into fibers which are covered with flesh and become muscles. The nerves that come forth at the extremities of the muscles and have already commenced to harden, to combine with hard piece ligaments, are the sinews which are joined and attached to the limbs. So this is his idea of medicine. So he's aware of nerves, and he's aware of muscles, and he's aware of bones and ligaments, but he thinks all of these come from nerves originally. So his argument here is nerves are too soft, so in order to help the rest of the body form, some become muscles, some harden and become ligaments. By this gradual development, the nerves are enabled to set the limbs in motion. Quote this one instance because the most evident of the wonders described in the book on the use of the limbs. The use of the limbs is clearly perceived by all who examine them with a sharp eye. In a similar manner did God provide for each individual animal of the class of mammalia. Such an animal is born is extremely tender and cannot be fed with dry food. Thus breasts were provided which yield milk. The young can be fed with moist food, which corresponds to the condition of the limbs of the animal, till the latter have gradually become dry and hard. All right. So he says, I describe this one thing because it is the most evident of the wonders. It's the most amazing thing described. But you could see this if you're just a clear observer. So God provides for each individual mammal. So when a mammal is born, it's too young to be fed with dry food, so it gets milk. Then the young is fed with moist food until eventually their limbs become dry and hard. So this is anatomy in a biblical context, right? Maimonides is a doctor, and he's a pretty good doctor. So he knows the greatest anatomy. He knows the sort of most advanced anatomy of his time. He says anatomy makes sense. In anatomy, dry and soft and hard is always mixed. Because you couldn't connect nerves and bones together. Nerves are too soft to impact hard bones. So muscles are used as intermediates and ligaments are also used as intermediates. In the same way, a young mammal is given milk because soft babies need moist milk that can harden and result in a hard adult animal. So all of this about softs and hard and dry and moist, this is all from Galen, who is, again, sort of the founder of medicine from an Aristotelian tradition. So Galen dissects a lot, which is why he knows about nerves and bones and ligaments, but his theory is a little strange, which is why you get this bit about like moist and soft and dry and hard. However, again, like when you look at this from Maimonides' perception, it's all about the wisdom of God and it's about divine acts. He's considering all of what's really the most scientifically advanced anatomy of its time in terms of God and in terms of God's wisdom. So once again, it's this Aristotelian science in a biblical context. All right, let's cover the conclusion and then take a 5-minute break, and we'll discuss a bit with Geshu. See if we can get the rest of the class to, or everyone to be on the same page here. All right, and by the way, this is Galen's idea of nerves coming directly from bones. So it's actually pretty good. I mean, it's not something you'd hope to see in a biology textbook, but it's pretty good considering the time. So, conclusion, Maimonides is a minor character in Western philosophy and a towering figure in Jewish philosophy. So if you read him like as a Western philosophy, like Russell did, he has a lot of training. He's obviously intelligent, but he's not rigorously logical. His most important function is collecting, organizing, transmitting knowledge, but he does not generate it. So this is important because he's living in a world before the printing press. Knowledge is constantly being lost, but it doesn't make for great philosophy if he's just really an encyclopedia. However, if you read him as a Jewish philosopher, there's this backbone of arguments and texts that go back centuries. There's an impressive body of knowledge that Maimonides has to know in order to argue. And it's this style of argumentation that you really don't see until historical and literary analysis become popular. It's not really a style of argumentation that's present elsewhere in the world before that. All right. Next time we're covering Thomas Aquinas. But before that, let's get Geshu in here and see if we can discuss this and make some sense of it. Sound good? All right. Okay. So I'll be back in 2 minutes. All right, I think Geshu may be feeling ill or something because he's not at his desk. Hopefully he'll come back in a sec, but in the meanwhile, let me take questions myself. All right, so I know this is quite difficult. I know this is quite confusing. So what are your questions? And I especially want to hear from people I haven't heard from yet. So I feel like there's a lot of people who've been pretty quiet this lesson. All right. People I haven't heard from yet. Still don't get that part. Which part aren't what about that are you not understanding? Right. I can't for the God as a tough topic because you're Chinese. I'm not. I have sympathy, but I'm not sure how to address that. The needle example in astrology is this idea that like he's trying to defend the idea of astrology that God would have created stars in order to determine the lives of people. And he says it's silly to think that God would have created the stars to determine the life of one person, but it would make sense to God created the stars to determine the life of all people. And his analogy here is if you were in a factory and you saw a big machine, you make needles, it'd be silly if that big machine only made one needle. However, it would make sense if that big machine made many needles. So that's his analogy there, is the stars affect the life of everyone because God is an intelligent factory designer. All right, does that make sense? All right. So for the three visions, why it matters is because Maimonides, if you remember, he's arguing with people who say this whole issue of Ezekiel's chariot, this specific part in the Bible, is not it's not something that should be taught at all. And so Maimonides is arguing with these people, saying that really you're not supposed to teach only one small part of it, but actually there's three parts of it. So when you thought you weren't supposed to teach any part of it, you're really only supposed to not teach one of the three parts. So that's Maimonides' argument here. And so that's what he's trying to prove, that there are really three parts of this, not just one part. All right. All right. Cool. By the way, can you guys see my face now? Hayot is a place. Hayot is not a place. Hayos is a thing. You cannot see my face. No? Shoot. All right. Let's, man. QQ is acting up there. All right, that should be better. Does he have any interpretation about plants? What's your specific question about interpretation about plants? And unfortunately, I don't know Islamic philosophy well enough to teach it. I know Jewish philosophy, I know Christian philosophy, I know general Western philosophy, but I do not know Islamic philosophy. All right. Yeah, so I'm not entirely sure what the question is about plants. Maimonides would have gone with the biblical interpretation where plants are part of what's put on earth for the purpose of mankind. So, or are you wondering in terms of this last bit with anatomy and animals, what his opinion of plants would have been? In that case, Galen, who Maimonides is working off of, Galen is only doing dissections of animals. It's actually pretty interesting stuff. So let's look at the picture again. So it is actually interesting. This is probably, at this point in time, it may be the only part of science that's really advancing. Now that the Greeks are done, the only point of science that's really advancing and is advanced pretty far by the Arabs is medicine, and they do lots of dissections, including famously dissections of the eye, and they figure out how the eye works. So yeah, but they don't do much in terms of plants. They don't understand plants particularly well. I think I might like to do a course one day on history of science, because it is a very interesting topic. Sort of intersects with philosophy a lot. And you get, yeah, although we will get a little bit of it with philosophy of science at the very end of the how to think section of the course. All right, cool stuff. Let's get some more questions. All right, no more questions? Famous words, speak now or forever hold your peace. All right, cool. So sorry for the mix-up with Gushu. I think he must be sick or something, because I really think he was planning on coming in and chatting a bit. So in terms of next time, we're meeting again on Saturday, of course. And you guys need to start doing some homework. So I actually have my list of people who've handed in homework for Socrates. We have 23 people. For Aristotle, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have, for Aristotle, unfortunately, I can't read your Chinese names. I can read the first one, which is Sophie. Can't read the rest. but QQ numbers 0803, 0126, 0224, 0801, and 0724. You're doing a great job. Good work on handing in your homework. For the rest of you, as they used to tell me in Hong Kong, 加油, add oil, start writing some, start doing some homework, contributing to the philosophical knowledge in the world. And yeah, all right, cool stuff. I will see you guys on Saturday. We ended a bit early today, so I'll stick around in the chat to answer any questions. But this is the end of the formal lesson. All right.
Oh, sorry. Are you?
No. Go ahead. I just turned
Yeah,
on
they told me you're calling me, but I'm really caught up in there.
Yeah.
I will talk with you later with my own account. After like 11:05. So if you're done, I'll just log out. I'll come back later.
All right.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Cool.
I would say the main difference between Jewish philosophy and Western philosophy is that Jewish philosophy is it's just a different tradition. I mean, there are certain books that you have to read. You have to take, for instance, the Torah or the Bible as the Word of God, and that's sort of the start of it. So there are intersections. But there are Jewish philosophers after, there are many Jewish philosophers, but in terms of Jewish philosophy, after Maimonides, it splits pretty far from Western philosophy. Because if you start with the idea that, the Torah or the Old Testament contains is entirely true, and is the Word of God, you're going to end up with a very different system than if you start with the idea that through logic and reasoning, that's how we discover truths about the world. All right, good question. So if you're interested in converting to Judaism, it's not an easy process. There's no central church. You'd have to go to an individual synagogue where you are. It depends. Some won't allow you to convert. Some will. So it really depends on who's the head of your local synagogue. Unlike the Catholic Church, there's no like pope or anything like that. So yeah. I'm not sure if that was like a casual question or if you're really interested in converting. There is a small Jewish community in China. So if you live in a big city, if you live in Beijing or Shanghai, um, you will be able to find synagogues. But yeah, God is a belief in our mind, not a source of the universe. That might be what you believe. And certainly there are other people who believe the same thing. Someone like Maimonides would definitely not have agreed with you. He would have very strongly disagreed with you. But all right, no problem. So yeah, it's 10:56. I'll be leaving now, but feel free to leave questions in the QQ chat, and I will come back to them when I get them. I think Gushu is planning on coming back and talking to you guys at like 11:05, I think he said. So you can stick around for that if you like, but he'll be talking to you on his own account. Anyways, thank you very much. Good night, and I'll see you Saturday.
各位好，我一直在这个各个群组里面这样来回跑啊，然后让大家久等了一下。关于哲学史啊，我一直在跟着啊，我也一直在听这个课的含金量，我也心里面非常非常有数啊，因为看到 Trevor 每一天在这个每天在这个地方啊埋着头啊，一摞一摞的书在这个地方总结。我自己心里面最担忧的一件事情还是什么呢？这个怕我们传递的这个信息啊，比如今天讲这个Maimonides 啊，这个迈蒙尼德啊，这讲他这样一个东西，里面的哲学思想我看了之后有一种高潮的这种感觉，不知道大家有没有？但是呢，问题就在于如果大家没有的话。我们怎么让大家去慢慢的有这种感觉啊？就是你看完之后，哇，这简直是，就是当他把亚里士多德的这些理念应用到去阐释犹太教的这个就哲学化犹太教的时候，然后包括如果大家对西方哲学有一个初步了解，包括他一直往后延续到17、18世纪的时候，他的哲学思想仍然在影响世界的时候，那个感觉是非常非常美妙的。所以我们今天跟大家交流的这个内容，就是我希望各位能够给出一系列你在课堂上这种体验，因为通过因为我不可能在每一个课上都会用这个大家能听懂的这种话把复杂东西讲出来Trevor 呢，他更多的是学术导向型的，那么也就是说他他做不到的一点就是能够通过一个英语学习者的角度，然后来看待这些东西。当然也是我们一个目的，就是把 Trevor 放在这个地方，大家体验一下大概美国课堂上是什么样的一种感受啊，就是大体上是这个样子，就是说你跟这东西差多远。但我还是希望在这个课结束的时候，各位能够多多少少的，就是说跟你的水平在某一个位置啊，然后 Trevor 提供这个课程在某一个位置，中间不要离太远。如果各位能够在接下来的这几天里面给我提供一个反馈的话，你可以私信我或者是直接在群里面写出来之后艾特我都可以最好是私信。这样的话我们可以去简单的去沟通一下。那么这样能够看得出来，就包括你认为在哪个地方你仍然属于困惑，尽管这些困惑有可能在课上已经被解决了，但因为比如说沟通上的障碍。大家英语听力的这种障碍，各种各样的这种障碍，你要告诉我。那么这样的话，所有的事情都可以通过这种沟通，我们来予以解决。因为给我的感受，我听了 Trevor 的课之后，它的内容我感觉是非常非常好的。但我一旦想到，如果我站在大家的这个位置上，你比如说我是19岁、20岁的时候，听课听起来仍然是非常吃力的主要还是英语听力的问题，对不对？主要还是我们。到现在为止，并没有，就比如说在座的西检的课堂上下来的同学听这个课，应该费的力气不是特别大，因为你知道如何去把这个一个思想呢，就是你在摄取信息的时候，你知道 what target where and focus on what， 对不对？就是你以什么东西为目标，然后你在不断学习的这个过程中去关注于什么东西但是对于一个新上传的这个同学，我深知你内心的这种苦楚，就是不知道从何下手。那好比眼前有这么一大块烧饼，但是你不知道从哪个地方开始舀起一样所以呢，我希望各位今天的这个沟通呢，更多的是就是大家现在如果有什么想法的话，也可以跟我说。我们在这个地方我简单的记录一下。那么这样的话，我们会花这样几周的时间，一边给大家仍然进行这个哲学史这样一个讲课的这样一个进程，然后另外一边呢，不断的缩小大家这个自身的这个知识的根基和Trevor 以及我能够提供的这个知识的这个底线，这个距离呢在不断我们再把这个距离不断的缩小，好吧？我不知道各位听懂没有？哎所以我等着各位咱们一起把这个事情做完。一会儿先跟大家说一下Trevor 的这个课程不仅仅是这一轮2轮，明年的3轮开课时间分别是1月4号就是1月的第一个星期、5月的第一个星期 和9月的第1个星期，所以还有3轮的这个课程啊。然后呢，因为替换率在50%啊，我觉得这一个课当成听力课就已经收获很大了。但实际上这个课的维度有非常多，维度在这儿，怎么把这个维度爆发出来，让大家能够顺顺当当的接住，这个是我们想做的事情。所以未来路还很长啊，我们将用最快的速度呢，再让大家把这个知识消化。就我觉得这个还是一句话，一个巴掌拍不响啊，就是我这一方把这个难度尽可能降低，把维度尽可能展开，大家在这一边啊，该让你去课前预习的东西该预习啊，还有这个如果没有上过西方人简史或政治哲学导论，没有经过这个规律的最基本训练的这样一类同学呢，你可以在群里面多向老成员去请教一下啊，就是说关于 mind map 应该怎么去做，在篇章的这个阅读环节你应该怎么去做啊，以及为什么这样去做，在段落应该怎么去做 ，paraphrase 怎么做 ，page butcher 怎么做，我觉得这个是比较好的。然后呢，当然有同学说这个关于哲学知识盲点太多，中文看起来很难，语言上障碍理解起来就更难了。那么你比如说这样一个问题，大家就有一套完整的一个思考思路。Catherine 她的问题就在于知识盲点多，于是影响到了理解。那么这样的话，它其实是双重困难的一个叠加，一个是知识体系上有漏洞啊，第二，那这意味着连中文的都不懂。第二呢，双重暴击就是语言上可能更难。这个问题解决是这样的啊，知识盲点多，中文看起来就很难的话，那么你要去看中文文本哪一个文本看起来比较难，所以要一逐级往下去减中文文本的难度。也就是说，你可以先就是我们管这个东西叫变量分离啊，就是现在你现在有2个变量，一个是知识体系的变量，一个是语言的变量，对不对？变量分离意味着能否我们直接干掉一个，哪一个好干掉呢？语言肯定是不太好干掉的，知识盲点其实是好干掉的。那么现在想补充你的知识盲点，我们从罗素的这本书读起的话，如果你觉得它难，那么意味着罗素往上的这个哲学专题你就不要读了，而你继续往下去读。你比如说你读替利的，对吧？或者最简单的一种方式是你读那个苏菲的世界 Sophie's World 啊，就是那瑞典那哥们写的那本小说，我不知道大家看没看过啊，是一本小说，是一个小孩子叫 Sophie， 然后呢，他跟一个陌生的怪叔叔写信的这样一个过程，对，去看他，然后把他们要点总结出来，然后再往上去叠加。然后当你熟悉了这个知识盲点之后，再去看罗素，看完罗素再去听课，听这个录音。然后大家一定要注意，你比如说 Trevor 这个课程，基本上每一个课程都是很有逻辑的啊，从这个 bibliography 就是background 开始讲起，然后讲 philosophy。今天讲这个迈蒙对吧？迈蒙尼德的时候啊。一共就3本书，对不对？一共有3本书，这3本书他们讲的是什么？为什么要去讲它？以及怎样它就是根据它是什么，怎样把这几个点联系在一起的？你根据这个方式带着问题去听他的课，我觉得会非常非常的容易。哇，这字念什么？月吗？看不清啊。他的问题是听力词汇量不足啊，一旦讲到复杂的词句，无法捕捉信息，造成知识结构构建缺失啊。Trevor 的课堂的这个知识结构基本上是能从 PPT 里面看出来的，这个可以去弥补。然后呢，听力词汇量不足，其实就是里面的那个 terms 啊 terminology 不足，对不对？就是你有2种啊，一种就是硬伤啊，一种是软伤。软伤就是对这一个学科里面的词是不记得的。那么这样的话，其实啊，这不仅是你的问题啊，这是全世界所有人的问题，包括英语为母语的人也有这个问题。但就是因为他听不懂这个哲学里面专业的这个词汇，所以他才去上哲学课。如果说在 Trevor 讲的所有的这个信息里面，每一个词都知道的话，那你为什么要上这个课呢？大家一定要搞清楚啊，我们有几个理念叫做 read to learn 和 listen to learn。什么叫做 learn？ 什么叫学习啊？就是 you turn something from unknown to known， 就是你听的目的就是想把一件事从不知道变成知道，是这样的。那么如果你是硬伤的话，你比如说这里面连虚词都听不懂，那可能需要通过其他的方式，包括去看纪录片，包括去看美剧等等，这样其他方式，这个我就不太清楚，大家应该去怎么做了啊？因为我不知道你的起点在哪，对吧？不同起点有不同的这个听力材料去练。其实我觉得最简单的起点像直接对应美国大学课堂的，大家知道是什么？是那个托福考试那个 TPO 的那个听力考试部分啊。你要是能把那个给拿下来的话，我估计你这课听起来一点问题都没有。是这样的。当然，同样反过来，你把这个课听完之后呢，往这个再去搞托福听力的话，我觉得应该28分以上应该没问题，满分30是这样的。好 ，Sophie 说助教的感谢助教资料，就是可不可以早2天给，要不然看完有点来不及啊。这个真的是取决于 Trevor 啊，我这个得催一下 Trevor， 因为助教的那个资料基本上是 Trevor 这个发给他们之后呢，连夜加工之后就给出来了，所以我自己本身是挺心疼助教的啊，所以我可能会催一下老师啊，这个是教师团队的这个问题，在这个地方给大家去道歉啊，给大家道歉。助教们在这里面一直扮演一个非常非常重要、非常令人感动的一个角色啊！如果大家能看到助教他们平时是怎么工作的话，我想各位我自己已经感动的不得了了，是这样的。好，这个我知道了啊。看导读不容易啊，很难理解一些话什么意思。还是那句话，看导读不容易。选择中文辅助啊，就是你的母语是什么，看母语这个可能会更好一些。等会儿，刚才我看的另外一个问题，我们在这也解决一下啊。李梅说最大的问题是不会提问啊，给大家推荐一本书，给你推荐一本书，这本书的书名叫《学会提问》，可好了啊，看一下啊，看完就知道了。这是一个系列啊，学会提问和批判性思维这2本书放在一起看啊，马上对你的这个思想的改造是巨大的，而且特别简单易懂。问题太多怎么解啊？就一个是问题太少，一个是问题太多，对吧？那么正好嘛，这2个浓缩出来就是你不会提问嘛，所以你需要读的书叫做学会提问啊，对吧？你这个问题本身就是不会提问嘛。开个玩笑啊 ，Don't take it seriously。OK， 所以今天呢，跟大家这个简单的去聊一聊啊，然后呢，有什么问题呢？我们一起来建设啊，我们一起来摸着石头过河啊。我们生长在一块教育呢严重缺位很多年的地盘啊，一片蛮荒。各位呢，在我眼里面都是叫做 pioneers 啊，都是先行者，都是先锋。所以呢，能够跟大家一起战斗啊，来完成中国新一代的这个启蒙运动，我觉得是非常荣幸的。It's my honor, it's my greatest honor to conduct with you, or conduct alongside with you. OK， 就这样。Catherine 提了一个问题：英文水平低，是不是要读适合自己的文本啊？是也不是啊，这个不是的原因是你得看什么叫适合自己的文本啊。我自己的这个阅读历程是这样，就是大家看没看过《新华文简史》那个难度的材料啊？我第一次在看，把它硬生生砍下来的时候，生词率几乎达到60%嘛，就是大多数词都不认识。那个东西啊，就是得靠一个动力。这个动力呢有几个啊？第一个动力来源于，就是你这人意志力特别坚强，就争强好胜啊。这个可能不是所有人都有啊。如果你没有的话，你需要转移一些动力，比如说，你可能把你对学习英语的这个热忱呐，尽量转成对知识结构的这个热忱。就是我今天这个，尽管我读的磕磕巴巴啊，但是英语在我眼睛里面，它不再是我目的了。我把它转成了说，我就想知道这个。这个比如说亚里士多德他的想法，他的3个观点啊，
像比如说我给当时自己就简单分享一下，我给当时自己做的这个任务啊，就是我读每一本英文书，尽管当时英文非常差的情况下，我给自己做的每一本任务是，在我读书的时候，今天我只读一章啊，这一章可能30多页啊，可能那时候就够我读一天的了。这30多页里面，比如说分成了4、5个小标题的话，我的任务就是在我笔记本上只记一页。这一页呢是一个小标题下面，我用3句话，无论中英文都可以啊，用3句话来用最粗暴的方式来说清楚这个人的观点是什么。今天就这一件事儿，那么这意味着这一页纸上我大概能写15句话左右，所以不贪多啊，因为我也不求说把这一章完全消化，我也知道自己消化不了，所以这15句话写下来之后，就说这是保底儿的啊，然后呢。第2页就是在复习的时候，我是把这15句话里面的那个关键词形成了一个网络啊，形成一个网络是这样的，大家可能没意识到啊，就是我自己走过来了，我深有感触，有好多对这个哲学家真实深刻的这个认知，是在未来不知道2、3年还是5、6年啊之后某一天蹲在马桶上的时候，坐在马桶上的时候，突然间就回想起来了，或者某一个场景触景生情一下想起来了，或者包括在看那个人与自然动物世界的时候，某一个瞬间就突然间想起来了，这个是非常非常令人震撼的。但如果大家没有过这个感觉的话，你可能很难体会到，就是这个知识储备就像一个定时炸弹一样，它只有在满足了很多条件之后，这个开关将会被触发。但这些条件不仅仅是停留在书本上的，有可能是在你生活中的某一个角落，某一个人说的一句话，某一个场景提醒了一下你。当然，你这个定时炸弹越来越多的时候，它本身就是互为这个触发这个条件啊。所以我有的时候才去强调说，大家有的时候需要触类旁通啊，学2门课、学3门课比学1门课更容易。目的性就在一次，比如说哲学史，你可能不需要做那么多作业啊，你就这样听着就可以了。或者说这个西检，你不需要做作业，你听就行了，把注意力放在哲学史上。但就是这样听，你比如说我平时自己在工作的时候，耳机就是一直这样插着，耳机这样插着的原因是我听什么呢？我听社会学，我听心理学，我听黄老师的那节课，我听白云讲亲密关系啊，就是非常心不在焉的这样一种听着。但是然后每天回家的时候也是在听啊，就是回家走的时候，这个我走过来上班啊，从家到办公室，25分钟的法语，然后呢，从办公室晚上回家的时候是25分钟的这个西班牙语，有的时候中间回家的话再加50分钟啊，所以这一段时间基本上就是1年把这2门语言的听力啊和这个欧洲式的这样一种用法，基本上就完成了。在平时办公的时候啊，带着听，也基本上把这个各个老师的课也都听完了，跟大家一同进步嘛，对吧？回家的时候，在自己做饭的时候呢，或者在收拾房间的时候，放的是这个 NPR， 就是那个 National Public Radio。NPR 大家都知道啊，就是有点像中央人民广播电台，然后那种感觉，就放那听着，基本上所有的这个时事呢，也就全都听到了啊。就是大家知道那个所谓那个 American English， 就是 the English that you're learning，that's called NPR English。世界上大家所说那个美音和英音其实是不对的啊。那个你们所知那美英英音，一个叫做 NPR English， 一个叫做 BBC English。就是 American English 在大家的那个概念里面其实是不对的，那个应该叫 NPR English National Public Radio， 因为美国有30多种口音啊，细分的话30多种口音，你们听那个是广播电台口音啊，就是比如说我们说汉语的时候，你学的到底是哪一种？咱们学的是中央人民广播电台的那个汉语啊，中央人民广播电台就是那种感觉啊。这个 BBC 呢，就是这个大家可能都知道，对吧？好，我觉得今天扯闲皮跟大家扯到这儿了啊，还有什么问题呢？还有什么问题我们以后慢慢的来讲。然后呢，我们呢这个团队啊，也在进行一个大的计划啊，这个计划可能还有，我很激动啊，还有不到1个月呢就公布出来了啊，在这个地方先给大家打一个提前量啊，放一个2017年的一个招啊，然后呢， 各位，你们现在需要做的。就是在2017年1月1号来临之前啊，尽你最大的努力扩充自己的知识容量啊，就是不要管它是什么啊，这个去接触它，去打开这扇门啊，就是你打开这扇门，外面是台风，也要把这门打开啊，这个门扇你脸上，也要把这个门打开，好吧？这个课大家注意啊，听力太难，没法一次跟完，常走神儿，那就不要跟完啊。这次课就听20分钟啊，是今天可以脑袋要爆炸了。把这个音频拿出来，平时放这个地方去听着啊。你自己去读材料的时候，比如说我今天读到的那个 Guide to Perplexed， 对吧？就是那个指点迷津啊，迷津指点，对吧？你看你听的那个部分，一共讲了20分钟。我今天说我想听这个部分，一会儿到时候截出来放在这个手机里面，放在哪儿？然后呢，读完这个部分的介绍、课程材料、维基百科啊，各种各样的东西读完了之后，然后再把那个地方一听，搞定了。我建议大家，你不是有那个 Trevor 不是给大家那个课程大纲了吗？把那个课程大纲打印出来，放在你书桌前面啊。然后呢，那个上面每一个标题，实际上我们管叫 knowledge block 啊，叫做知识块啊。你听完一个之后，不要管记住还是不记住，直接把那个地方给划掉了。各位听完没？听懂没？就是你要有一个进度条的这样一个感觉。对，就是那本书啊 ，Neil Brown。你看王曼他给了一说，之前听半个小时就觉得现在差不多能跟完了啊。那接下来就是大家在群里面自行讨论啊，主要是王曼给大家介绍一些你的经验，对吧？好，那我觉得今天我还有其他的事情要去做啊，不能陪大家太多了啊，就这样了，好吧？谢谢各位啊，谢谢各位，谢谢你们读书，我们以后常沟通啊，大家有问题直接问啊，直接私信也好啊，在这里面艾特我也好，在微博上艾特我也好啊，70%-80%的这个问题我都不会回答的啊，这个但是一旦出现了典型性的问题，我还是一定要回答的。好，谢谢各位。